Hi folks, and welcome to week 2's fly. This is the rough hares here. I'm using an 8/0 uni thread in dark brown. Okay, so I'm going to start this off. This is a nymph hook, a partridge of Redditch K4 AY size 12. Okay, so start off, just put a few turns in, and then we're going to put the rib in. This is a piece of Sibai flat wire gold in medium. And this wants to sit on the side of the fly all the way down, rather than on the top like we did last week. This wants to sit on the side of the fly. Once you put a few turns in, you can just pull it back, just to make sure that there's as little as possible. Okay, remember to keep spinning that thread anti-clockwise to make sure that it sits nice and flat. Okay, and then when you get to a point approximately opposite where the barb would be, that's where we're going to tie in the tail. So the rib now hangs out of the way. It's still sitting directly on the side. Now all that the tail is on this one, for the original version, is just a pinch of hairs here. Okay, so I've pre-prepared this, but I will show you how to prepare this in the classroom, in the club. Okay. And your tail probably wants to be about the length of the fly, the length of the body of the fly. So tie that up, tie that in nice and neatly. You don't need to worry about covering every single bit because this is a dubbed fly, so the body is being covered in hairs here, so that's just a pinch of hair there. You can see I've got some underfluff in there, I'm not very happy with that. Okay. You can come back to where we tied in the tail. Okay, spin your thread so it's nice and flat. And then we're going to use some dubbings. Now when you're putting dubbing on, it's important that you only spin in one direction. So I've already pre-plucked the dubbing off the hare's mask. But what I'm going to do now is just twist that nice and tightly onto there. Okay, however much dubbing you think you need, you probably need half of it. That seems to be the general rule. Okay, and then once that's spun on, we can wrap that up right the way up till we get up towards the head of the fly. You may see the odd long bit sticking out that's just a little bit unsightly. Okay, we want a little touch more now. So what we're going to do now is slightly thicken up where the thorax area of the fly sits. So we go back, entirely put the dubbing on, slide it up into place. And we're just going to go back a couple of turns there just to give a slight indication of a slightly thicker thorax area. Again, just a little pinch more dubbing. Got all the time in the world for this one. You're better off putting small amounts of dubbing on rather than overdubbing flies. One of the biggest mistakes that beginners make is overdubbing. Okay, nice and easy that one. Okay, and then we've wrapped the dubbing away from us in the same direction that we would normally wrap the thread. So if we were to wrap the rib in exactly the same way, the rib would actually dig into the dubbing and you wouldn't see the rib as much. So what we're going to do is what's called counter wrap the rib. So wrap the rib in the opposite direction. So effectively the rib comes underneath and we wrap this the opposite way around to the thing. Try and keep the wire flat. Try and keep your spacings quite nice and even. Okay. Once you get up to your head, we're going to bring the rib across behind so that you're tying it off. Okay, now you can cut the rib off, but it always leaves a little nib end. So what I find is a little bit better is if I bring one turn in front of the rib, and then I can just bend the rib backwards and forwards. It'll just snap off nice and cleanly. Okay, I'm going to wet my fingers a little bit just to draw back that dubbing so I can start to form a nice neat head. You only want a small head on this fly, but be careful you don't crowd the eye. It's very important that you don't crowd the eye because that's the bit that you obviously need to tie on with. Just form a nice neat head. Okay. And a whip finish. Okay. And the last thing we need to do is we snip off that thread underneath. Or slice off that thread, I should say. Okay, and what we need to do now is give the fly a little roughing up. So what I've got here, if you can see this on the video, I've got just a lolly stick with some Velcro on a thick end and a thin end. Basically what we're doing here is teasing out some of the fibres in this, in these guard hairs. And then once we've teased out these fibres, comb everything back. And what you get then is a lovely buggy finish to the fly. Okay, last step. Again, if you remember, I told you last week to cut down the tips on your Sally Hansen, so it's really fine. Now this is where you'll see why it's important to do that. Just a little hair there. Okay, and you can just touch it onto the. Just touch it on just to varnish the head. This does two things. It protects the head. It gives it a little bit of a sheen, but it also makes sure that that your thread, your whip finish that you did, actually stays tied, and it just lengthens the longevity of the fly. And that's it. That's week 2's fly complete.